There's a rhythm to the road that every touring musician knows by heart. It's the hum of tires on asphalt, the hypnotic flash of white lines under the headlights, the endless ribbon of highway that connects one small town to the next. The road is a place of profound contradiction. It's a symbol of freedom and possibility, the very thing that allows a singer to share their soul with the world. But it's also a place of immense loneliness, of exhaustion, of constant motion that can wear a person down to the bone. The road is a promise, but it's also a threat. It gives life to a career, but it can also, in a single tragic instant, take it all away. For decades, one of country music's most beloved figures lived his life by this rhythm. He was a man with a smooth baritone voice and a towering presence, a man who, by a staggering twist of fate, had already cheated death once in the most famous tragedy in country music history. He thought he'd used up all his bad luck in one go, but the road has a long memory, and it always, eventually, collects its due. This is the incredible story of the Tall Texan, the grand old Opry legend, Billy Walker. To understand a man like Billy Walker, you have to understand the world that forged him. He was born in 1929, a child of the Great Depression, raised on the vast, unforgiving plains of West Texas. In the 1930s and 40s, life was hardscrabble, and entertainment was a precious escape. Before television became the centerpiece of every living room, families gathered around the radio, tuning in to live broadcasts that brought the world to them. This was the golden age of the live country music review. Forget polished studio albums and digital streams. Music was a raw, immediate experience. All across the South and Midwest, powerful radio stations hosted their own jamborees. There was the Wheeling Jamboree in West Virginia, the Renfro Valley Barn Dance in Kentucky, and most famously, the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. But before a performer could even dream of the Opry, they had to prove themselves on the fiercely competitive regional circuits. For a young Texan, the pinnacle of this world was the Big D Jamboree, broadcast live from the Sportatorium in Dallas. It was a crucible of talent, a place where farmhands with guitars could become local heroes overnight. The sound was raw and energetic, a blend of traditional country, western swing, and the first hints of a rebellious new sound called rockabilly. It was in this environment that a musician learned their craft not in a sterile recording booth, but in front of a live cheering, sometimes jeering audience. You had to be good, you had to be charismatic, and you had to be tough to survive. This was the world that called to Billy Walker, a world that promised a way out and a way up, armed with nothing but a guitar and a voice. It was a world that would lead him to another legendary stage, the Louisiana Hayride, the very same stage that would serve as the launching pad for a shy young man from Tupelo, Mississippi, who was about to change the world. William Marvin Walker entered the world in Ralls, Texas, and from an early age he seemed destined to stand out. By the time he was a teenager, he had shot up to a height of over 6 feet, earning him the nickname that would stick with him for life, the Tall Texan. But it was his voice, a smooth, warm baritone, that was his true calling card. Inspired by the singing cowboys and country crooners he heard on the radio, he picked up a guitar and began to write his own songs. His ambition was as big as his home state. By his late teens, he was a regular on the Big D Jamboree, a remarkable achievement for someone so young. He quickly became a local sensation, his towering frame and gentle voice making him a memorable performer. He wasn't just another singer. He had a stage presence that was both commanding and comforting. This early success wasn't just a fluke, it was the result of relentless work, playing dusty honky-tonks, church socials, and any stage that would have him. His growing reputation eventually brought him to the attention of the producers of the Louisiana Hayride, the Opry's biggest rival, and a show often called the Cradle of the Stars. The Hayride was known for being a bit more adventurous than the Opry, more open to the burgeoning sounds of rock and roll. It was here, in Shreveport, that Billy Walker's story became intertwined with the very fabric of music history. In 1954, the show's producer, Horace Logan, booked a young, unknown singer from Memphis who had just released his first single. The kid was nervous, raw, and nobody knew quite what to make of him. The established star tasked with introducing this newcomer to the Hayride audience was none other than Billy Walker. On that fateful night, the Tall Texan stepped up to the microphone and introduced, for one of the very first times on a major stage, a young Elvis Presley. Walker would later recall the polite but slightly confused applause. No one could have known they were witnessing the dawn of a cultural revolution. It's a remarkable, often forgotten footnote in Billy's career. He was there, a gatekeeper of the old guard, welcoming the future. While Elvis went on to global superstardom, Billy continued to build his career brick by brick. He signed with Columbia Records and began releasing a string of singles. He had moderate success, but that one career-defining hit remained elusive. Then, in 1960, he achieved the dream of every country singer. He was invited to become a member of the Grand Ole Opry. This was the ultimate validation, a permanent place among the legends of the genre. 2 years later, in 1962, the hit finally came. It was a song called Charlie's Shoes, a classic country tale of a man stepping into the shoes of the fellow who stole his girl, only to find they're a perfect fit because he's about to steal her back. The song was a runaway success, hitting #1 on the country charts. It was the perfect vehicle for Billy's smooth, conversational vocal style. With its catchy melody and clever lyrics, Charlie's Shoes cemented his status as a major star. He followed it up with other hits like Willie the Weeper and the iconic Cross the Brazos at Waco, a dramatic storytelling song that became another of his signatures. He was a constant presence on the charts and on the Opry stage. He was living the dream. But in March of 1963, his life story would take a turn so dramatic, so chilling, that it would forever haunt him and become a legendary piece of country music folklore. On March 3, 1963, a massive benefit concert was held in Kansas City for the family of a disc jockey who had recently passed away. The lineup was a who's who of country music royalty, including Patsy Cline, Cowboy Copas, Hawkshaw Hawkins, and Billy Walker. After the show, the stars were anxious to get back to Nashville. Patsy and Copas were flying on a private plane piloted by her manager, Randy Hughes. Billy's good friend, Hawkshaw Hawkins, was also scheduled to fly back on a commercial flight. However, as often happens in the life of a touring musician, another commitment came up. Billy had to stay behind in Kansas City for a bit longer. He had a seat booked on that commercial flight, but since he no longer needed it, he offered his ticket to Hawkshaw. It seemed like a simple, friendly gesture. Hawkshaw could get home to his wife and newborn baby a little sooner, but Hawkshaw had another offer. He was invited to fly back with Patsy Cline on her private plane. He took that offer instead, leaving the commercial ticket unused. As Billy stayed behind in Kansas City, the small piper Comanche carrying Patsy Cline, Cowboy Copas, Hawkshaw Hawkins, and Randy Hughes took off into a stormy sky. It never made it to Nashville. The plane went down in the woods near Camden, Tennessee, killing everyone on board. The news was a devastating blow to the music world. It was country music's day the music died. But for Billy Walker, the grief was compounded by a chilling, inescapable thought. If Hawkshaw hadn't taken the spot on Patsy's plane, he would have used Billy's ticket on the commercial flight. And if Billy hadn't had to stay behind, he might have been on that fatal flight himself, as he often flew with his friends. The tragedy had brushed past him by the thinnest of margins, a ghost of what might have been. He had been spared by a simple twist of fate, a last-minute change of plans. It was a second chance at life, but one that would cast a long shadow over the next 4 decades. The aftermath of the plane crash left an indelible mark on Billy Walker. To lose so many friends in one fiery instant was devastating. To know that you were spared by sheer dumb luck is a psychological burden that's difficult to comprehend. For the rest of his life, Billy carried the knowledge of that day with him. It wasn't something he spoke of often in public interviews, but to those close to him, the event was a defining moment. This experience seemed to instill in him a profound appreciation for life, but also a sense of cosmic fragility. He poured himself into his work and his family. His wife, Betty, was the anchor of his life. They had a long and devoted marriage, a true partnership that weathered the storms of a life lived in the public eye and on the road. Betty was often with him, a constant presence of love and support in a transient world. Their love story was the quiet, steady rhythm beneath the music. Friends and fellow Opry members remember Billy as the consummate professional, a true gentleman of the old school. He was known for his kindness, his generosity to up-and-coming artists, and his unwavering dedication to the Grand Ole Opry. He never took his membership for granted. For over 45 years, he was a fixture on that sacred stage, showing up week after week to deliver his classic hits with the same warmth and sincerity as he did in his prime. There's a telling anecdote about his character. In an industry known for big egos, Billy remained remarkably down to earth. He was approachable, always had time for a fan, and treated everyone from the biggest star to the stagehand with the same level of respect. He understood that he was a custodian of a tradition. He saw himself not just as an entertainer, but as a link in a chain that stretched back to the very founders of country music. The survivor's guilt, as it's often called, never fully left him. He had been given more time to sing, more time to love his wife and raise his children, more time to stand in the famed circle of wood on the Opry stage. He seemed determined not to waste a second of it. He toured relentlessly, not just across the United States, but around the world, becoming an international ambassador for country music. He hosted his own television show, Billy Walker's Country Carnival, and continued to record music. He wasn't chasing trends. He was staying true to the classic country sound he loved. He was a living, breathing piece of country music history, a man who had seen it all, from the birth of rock and roll to the rise of the Nashville sound and beyond. He had been given a second act, and he played it with grace, dignity, and a heart full of gratitude. But the road that had spared him once was still out there, waiting. Billy Walker's career was remarkably free of controversy. He wasn't a hellraiser like some of his contemporaries. His name was never splashed across tabloids for scandals or feuds. The only debate or controversy associated with his life is not about a personal failing, but about the brutal, unspoken reality of the profession he loved. It's the controversy of the road itself. The life of a touring musician, especially from Billy's generation, is often romanticized. We see the bright lights of the stage, the adoring fans, the camaraderie of the band. But the reality is a grueling, soul-crushing grind. It's a life lived out of a suitcase in a different cheap motel every night. It's a diet of greasy spoon diners and lukewarm coffee. It's thousands upon thousands of miles spent in a van or a bus, hurtling through the night to get to the next gig, often on just a few hours of sleep. This was the life for the vast majority of working musicians. Only the absolute biggest stars could afford the luxury of private jets or lavish tour buses. For journeyman stars like Billy Walker, even with his Opry status, touring meant being on the road, personally driving or being driven from one town to the next. The financial pressures of the business demand a relentless schedule. A day off is a day you're not earning. So you push on, through rain, through fog, through exhaustion. This is the unsettled debate that Billy Walker's story brings into sharp focus. The human cost of our entertainment. We, the audience, demand the music. We buy the tickets to see our favorite stars in our hometowns. But we rarely consider the physical and mental toll that demand takes on the performers. The history of popular music is littered with the casualties of the road. From the bus crash that killed Clifford Brown and Richie Powell, to the one that nearly killed Gloria Estefan, to the accidents that claimed the lives of musicians like Johnny Horton and Jim Croce, the highway is a recurring villain in the story of American music. Billy's story is a particularly poignant example of this. He did it for over half a century. From his teenage years at the Big D Jamboree to his final days as a beloved patriarch of the Opry, the road was his workplace. The risk is ever present, a silent passenger on every tour. The controversy isn't an accusation against any one person, but a question aimed at the entire system. Is there a better way? A safer way? In an industry built on constant motion, how do we protect the artists who are the lifeblood of the entire enterprise? Billy Walker's life didn't provide an answer, but his death made the question impossible to ignore. The long-term significance of Billy Walker is not that of a revolutionary who changed the sound of music, but that of a pillar who held it up. He represents a vital, often underappreciated class of artist, the stalwart. He was the bedrock, the reliable and constant presence that gives a genre its heart and soul. While superstars flare brightly and sometimes burn out, it's the Billy Walkers of the world who keep the tradition alive, night after night, year after year. His story has become an essential piece of country music lore, primarily because of its incredible, almost unbelievable brush with fate. The Patsy Cline plane crash is the single most mythologized tragedy in the genre's history. Billy's role in that story, as the man who was spared, gives his own life a faded, almost legendary quality. It ensures that his name will forever be mentioned alongside those of the fallen icons, a living testament to the fragility of life and the randomness of destiny. For over 40 years, he was the man who lived. It's an extraordinary legacy, one that transcends his musical catalog. Then came May 21st, 2006. At 77 years old, an age when most people are long retired, Billy Walker was still on the road. He had just finished a show at a club in Foley, Alabama, and was heading home to Nashville in his van. With him were his beloved wife, Betty, and two of his band members, bassist Charles Lilly and guitarist Daniel Patton. They were traveling north on Interstate 65, a stretch of highway they had likely driven hundreds of times before. According to the official reports just outside of Montgomery, the van suddenly veered off the highway, traveled along the median, and then overturned. The exact cause was never determined, but speculation has always centered on the possibility that Billy, who was driving, either fell asleep or suffered a medical emergency. All 4 occupants of the van were killed. The news was staggering. The man who had miraculously cheated death in 1963 had finally met his end on the very road that had been his home for a lifetime. The tragic poetry of it was almost too much to bear. And the fact that he died alongside his wife, Betty, the woman who had been by his side through it all, turned the tragedy into a devastatingly sad love story. They had lived their lives together, and in the end, they left the world together. The consequences of that day were felt deeply in Nashville. The Grand Ole Opry mourned one of its longest-serving and most loved members. It was a stark reminder that even the legends are mortal. His death, so many years after the Patsy Cline crash, served as a tragic bookend to an era. It highlighted once again the dangers of the touring life, a lesson that the music industry seems forced to relearn with every generation. Billy Walker's story therefore matters because it's a perfect microcosm of the country music experience. The dreams, the dedication, the fellowship, the brushes with history, and the ever-present dangers of a life lived in motion. So when we look back on the life of the Tall Texan, what is the final picture that comes into focus? Is it the young star introducing Elvis Presley to the world? Is it the chart-topping singer of Charlie's Shoes? Is it the haunted survivor of a legendary tragedy? Or is it the elderly man at the wheel on a dark Alabama highway? The truth is, it's all of them. Billy Walker's life was a testament to consistency and quiet dignity in a world that often prizes flash and flame. He was not the biggest star, but he was one of the most enduring. He showed up, did the work, and treated people with kindness. He was a loving husband, a devoted father, and a steadfast friend. He was a pillar of the Grand Ole Opry, a living bridge connecting the genre's past to its present. His story is a profound meditation on fate. To be spared from one of history's most famous accidents only to perish in another, more common one, 4 decades later, feels like a story ripped from the pages of a novel. It leaves us with a sense of awe at the strange, unpredictable currents that guide our lives. He was given 43 extra years, a gift of time that he filled with music and love. Perhaps the most fitting way to remember him is to think of that highway. The road was the setting for his entire professional life. It brought him to stages where he made people happy, and it brought him to the brink of death and back again. In the end, it was the place where his journey concluded, alongside the love of his life. There is a heartbreaking symmetry to it, a life that began and ended in motion. The hum of the tires has faded, the headlights have dimmed, but the gentle, warm voice of Billy Walker and the incredible story of the life he lived will echo down the long, lonesome highway of country music history forever.